Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Uncle Matt. We're here live on a Friday night. First live stream we've done in a minute. As I mentioned, kind of my 2024 channel update. These will be more sporadic. When there's stuff to talk about, we'll jump on, we'll talk. And tonight is a good night to do that because a lot has happened this past week that directly relates to my interests. So maybe not everybody that watches the channel's interest, but my interest at least. And, we started out with the big news that the Tennessee Titans have hired their new head coach. They hired the offensive coordinator from the Cincinnati Bengals, Brian Callahan, to be the replacement for Mike Vrabel, the new head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, if you go back to the last live stream that we did, it was when Vrabel was fired. And I was pretty negative on the situation. I actually, in the thumbnail, made a clown face on Amy Adams Strunk. And I think, I think I even said that one. I think multiple things can be true at the same time. I still maintain that the Vrabel situation was not handled the best, that it was a little bit of a negative situation. There was some mismanagement there that I still think went down. I maintain that, but I think, what has happened in the week and a half, 2 weeks since has all mostly been positive, has all mostly gone in the right direction. I mean, you can't see what everybody's written about Brian Callahan. You can't see everything he said. You can't see everything the team said and not feel positive about the hire, about him coming in. It's almost too positive. It's almost too good. Like, there's so much positivity around the hire. Like, there's got to be something wrong. There's got to be another shoe that drops. It's been too positive. Everybody's been like, he's great fit, everything the Titans need. He's a collaborative guy, flexible with the offense, works with the players, a player's coach. There's just everything has been so positive, and I'm just keep thinking like, okay, but what's the other issue? The one issue that arose for me, he gave a Jurgen Klopp quote in his opening press conference. Obviously, I'm a Manchester United fan. Don't want to hear from a Liverpool manager. Of course, that directly led to Jurgen Klopp retiring, or not retiring, but announcing he will not be coaching Liverpool beyond this year. So maybe Brian Callahan put the knife in Klopp a little bit. I don't know. But I mean, I don't have anything but positive things to say about the hire thus far, but ultimately the proof's in the pudding. There's a lot left to be said, a lot left to be seen about how it actually plays out on the paper. Along with him being hired as the head coach, there was a clear line drawn in the sand that Rand Carthon is in charge of the team in terms of personnel, in terms of roster decisions, and also interestingly, like in terms of oversight over the coaching staff, which I think you can read between the tea leaves here and start to put together what the fallout with Vrabel was that Vrabel was not as open to changing his coaches as the higher-ups in the team would have liked. He was not as flexible with changing the offense, changing the personnel as people would have liked. And that led to the decision to fire him and bring in somebody who would be more cooperative with what Amy and Rand want. Now, I don't think like my dad read that whole thing. This is the official Uncle Mad's dad report. My dad has been, I think he's a big Vrabel guy. I think he's been very bitter about the whole thing. And the way they laid it out, where they said Rand was in charge of everything, my dad was like, this is a disaster. How can you have a coach that has no say in his coaching staff and his roster? And to an extent, I agree with him. As a former, I coached soccer for many, many years. I would have a hard time having somebody else make the decisions about who's on my roster, who my assistant coaches would be. But I think the idea is that Rand and Brian Callahan are going to work together, but they wanted to draw a line in the sand to say if there ever is a holdup, ever is a conflict, ever is any type of disagreement, Rand is kind of the higher on the food chain, and that makes me think that was probably what a lot of the issues with Vrabel was, where like there was not a clear cut who made the final decisions on a roster. If Vrabel wanted the team to sign a guy and Rand didn't, who was going to make that decision? If Rand thought we should cut somebody and Vrabel wanted to keep him, who made that decision? If we wanted to change coaches, and you can see, the stubbornness of Vrabel. Like, I still believe he's a good coach. I still believe he could potentially have a lot of success in the NFL wherever he lands, although it's starting to look more and more like he's not going to land anywhere. I was, right out of the gate saying, I'm not always going to be right in my predictions. I'm not always going to be right in my thoughts. I thought Vrabel would land a job before the Titans would end up hiring a new coach, and so get more and more like Vrabel might be out of the NFL at least for a year, because there's, I believe, at the time of this recording, there's only, I think there's 2 NFL openings left, and one of them I think most people think is already filled. Like there's the Commanders and the Seahawks both still are without a head coach. But most of the scuttlebutt seems to be that Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, is a shoe-in to get the Commanders' job. So realistically, it seems like the Seahawks' job is the only job left open. And there's Vrabel out there. There's, Bill Belichick is out there. Tons of other coaches. But it seems like, more and more the trend in the NFL, and maybe this is just the way it has to go, is we're going towards player-friendly, team-friendly, young, offensive-minded coaches, and that's not a good place to be for the Mike Vrabels and the Bill Belichicks of the world. I was thinking today, I was wondering, because obviously there was some, stuff coming out from the team earlier a couple weeks back that, Vrabel was safe. There was no intention to move on from him. And I think we know, Amy Adams Strunk, team owner, I think we know from following what she's done in her time as leadership is that she's a little bit, for better or worse, reactionary to certain things that, more than just like the overall big picture. Certain touchstone moments tend to set her off a little bit more. So like last season, I don't think there's any coincidence that whatever it was, a day or two after AJ Brown and the Eagles destroyed the Titans, that's when she pulled the trigger on firing John Robinson, who traded away AJ Brown. I don't think there's any coincidence there. There may have been some stuff where she was starting to feel uneasy about him, starting to like being a little concerned, but that she pulled the trigger right after that AJ Brown game, it just had to be a set off trigger moment for her in that regard. And I really look at the 2 games from this past season against the Houston Texans as what I think were kind of the trigger moments for her deciding to move on from Mike Vrabel. Or at least, if he won't get in line, if he won't do what I ask him to do, I'm going to move on from Mike Vrabel moments. Because, she's a very prideful woman. She's outright said, I want to win a championship. This is not my father's NFL. I want to run this team to be successful. I want to win a championship. I want to do what it takes to win a championship no matter what. But you have to understand, you have to believe there's a certain degree those Houston games have an extra little bit of significance to her, especially the first one where we decided to spit in the face of the Houston history and wear the Oilers uniforms against the Texans here at Nissan Stadium, which probably set her off even more to get to finally wear the Houston Oilers uniforms again, to finally break that seal, bring those back, decide to wear them against the new Houston team, the Texans, and lose in the home stadium. That had to be something that did not sit well with her. Like, I didn't, understandably so, and I don't think it sat well with many Titans fans, because it's like, yeah, I said we should retire those uniforms, so we can't wear those again. You can't do what we did. You can't try to rub it in the face to the Texans and wear the Oilers uniforms and then lose in your home stadium. That probably unsettled her a little bit. And then we went down to Houston 2 weeks later, and the Texans just beat the crap out of us. Looked like we just didn't care, could not have cared less to be there. And I feel like those 2 games had to be something that really opened her eyes, really made her start to think, is this guy, Vrabel, is he the guy to lead us forward? I think he needs to make changes. I think he needs to adjust. I think he needs to do some things differently, or he's not the guy to move us forward. And then he probably wasn't willing to do those things, and she decided to move on. And I can understand that, because if you're looking at Houston, you see how quickly they turn things around, how their young quarterback has got them on fire. Their new young coach has got them on fire. You look at Indy, who hired a new coach and got them pepped up a little bit, even with their rookie quarterback missing most of the season. Jacksonville is a little wishy-washy, but still, if you're looking at the rest of our division and you're kind of looking at Vrabel and thinking this guy, is he going to be stubborn? Is he just going to be stuck in his ways? Is he just going to be determined to do things the way he sees fit? Or can he get in line? Can he, have some compromise? Can he have some adjustments? And I think, if you've followed Vrabel enough, that's probably not his MO. That's probably what led to him being gone, was just like her feeling like we need to adjust. We need to compromise. We need to do things differently than what we've been doing. And him saying like, yeah, this is the way we do things. This is the way we got to go forward. And now that we're looking at the way the offseason played out, and he's not looking likely to get a new head coaching job, maybe he overplayed his hand. I like I said, I still got respect for him. I still think he's a good guy. He's a good coach. I still think he's a coach who can be successful in the NFL. But I don't know. Maybe he thought there was, greener grass for him somewhere outside of Tennessee, and just tried to draw a line in the sand and think like, my way or the highway. You want to get rid of me, I'll leave and I'll find something better. And now he, at least for this offseason, looks like he might not. He might be out for a year, might come back in the mix next year. But, give him a year to reset the batteries. Maybe he learned something. He'll come back stronger. I don't know. All I know is, I'm happy with the hire of Brian Callahan for now. There's a lot to be seen. Obviously, there's a big onus now on Rand Carthon to use the high draft pick we have, to use the cap space we're going to have to formally rebuild this roster and make it a competitive NFL team. And I told my dad was like kind of unhappy about like the alignment. I was like, well, we know Rand's the man. He's the buck stops with Rand Carthon now going forward. So he is the next line of defense in terms of if things don't work, if the team sucks next year, if the roster looks bad, if we have a draft pick that's a bust, if the coordinators that come in don't look good, that's going to fall right directly on Rand Carthon, at least for the first wave. So we know who to blame. But if it all works out, if it's all great, awesome, which is what we want. So I'm confident. I've seen, Rand's first offseason mostly good. There's, it was a tough season where you're having to kind of patch something together with what's left of the, Super Bowl window team and try to throw some things in to try to keep it together. And ultimately it just was a failure, but I don't put too much of that on him. I put that, on just, the dying embers of what was a good era for the Titans, trying to hold it together as best we could, and just injuries and everything else just let it fall apart. But now, going forward for the next 2-3 years, everything's theoretically been put in place the way he would want it to be put in place, so there's, nobody to blame but him if it doesn't work. He was apparently a big part of spearheading bringing in Callahan. So even if you can't even blame Callahan first, because you got to blame Rand first if things don't go well. But I'm optimistic things are going well, which feels weird because I'm a very pessimistic person. So maybe that's just why I'm looking for something to go wrong, why I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. But everybody who writes about this hire has liked it. Everybody who talks about this hire has liked it. Everything I've seen in Brian Callahan's press conference and his interviews, everything he's done so far seems just great. And I'm like, there just has to be something wrong. There's no way this could be successful. It's really weird though, because like it feels like every single one of the new coaching hires that has happened so far this offseason in the NFL has been met with nothing but praise. Like everybody's like, this is a great man. He's a great mind, a leader of men, a great educator, a great teacher, like across the board for like the criticism. The only criticism that seems to have like come out for like teams this coaching cycle has been the teams that kept coaches that people thought they should have fired, like the Cowboys keeping Mike McCarthy, the Eagles keeping Sirianni. It's weird. Those have been more scrutinized than all the new hires. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm optimistic. There's definitely a chance for the team to, get some things going. A lot of it's going to come down to obviously Will Levis. Is he the real deal? We saw flashes this season, but, a lot still to be desired there, a lot to hope for. And, you're bringing in a guy in Brian Callahan that you expect can, if there's going to be something there, can get the best out of Will Levis. And that's the hope going forward. A lot of cap space, got to use that wisely. Big, high draft pick, got to use that wisely. But I think a big key is going to be, and I think this is one of the, failings. If there's one thing I think that Mike Vrabel definitely failed at, it was in properly like building a staff. Like I never have liked, outside of a handful of guys, his choices for staff. Like the offensive line coaches have been a disaster. Like the fact that we have just falling apart on the offensive line. It goes directly to, the offensive line, because you can say, like, coaches can only so much. You got to give them the talent. But, I mean, like, we had Mike Munchak here who was turning, like, undrafted free agents and seventh-round draft picks into Hall of Famers, or not Hall of Famers, but regular Pro Bowlers, like Chad Harwick or whatever this center's name was. Michael Ruse, nobody had Michael Ruse on their radar, and he was a steady Pro Bowler for years because of Mike Munchak. I mean, like, if you got to get, like, there's obviously the connection people have alluded to of Brian Callahan's dad, Bill Callahan, being one of the all-time legends of offensive line coaching. Could he potentially jump for the Browns here? There's been reports, yes, it's going to happen. No, it's not going to happen. But, I mean, that's the key thing is, like, and the more and more that the offense continued to be the way the offense was under Vrabel, the more and more it was like, this is going to win against what I just said. But how much of this was the edict coming down from Vrabel? How much of this was what the coordinators? I remember, like, at one point in time, about around the middle of, like, 2 seasons ago, like, there was a lot of people, it was like hating Todd Downing. Just all the Titans fans being like, Todd Downing is so stupid. We got to get rid of Todd Downing. He's an idiot. He's the worst offensive coordinator ever. And somebody, I don't remember who it was. I wish I could give credit who it was, but somebody on a podcast I listened to said, the thing you have to remember is Todd Downing is not living on an island with the offense, just doing whatever he wants to do. Whatever he's doing in terms of the way he runs the offense is being handed down and approved by the head coach. So if you don't like the offense, if you don't like the offense Todd Downing was running, you got to at least look at Vrabel a little bit and say, you're the guy in charge of this whole thing. You're the guy who's letting this happen. And the fact that when we changed Todd Downing out and the offense this past year basically looked exactly the same, even with a different coordinator who was on the staff before anyway. So how much of a change was it? That was where it started to get a little alarming to me with Vrabel. Like, as much as I like him, as much as I thought he was a good coach, the fact that the trend continued on with how uninventive, how unimaginative, how dull the offense was, just continued even when we changed out Todd Downing. That sort of like sent off a little alarm bell to me, like, this is coming from above. And like I said, that might have been a thing that, Amy went to Mike Vrabel with, was like, hey, your edict, your style of offense that you're trying to get the team to play has to change. And he probably said no. And she probably said, you got to go. And in that regard, I think it's great. That's the one thing where I'm like, if he said no, if he was that stubborn, unwilling to change, then I think we had to change, because I've said for going on 3-4 years now, just the creativity in our offense was so lacking. Like, you watch these teams that are playing this weekend and you look at, like, what the 49ers do with Deebo Samuel. You look at what the Lions do with, like, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds, who was briefly a Tennessee Titan. Like, you look at what the Ravens are doing with Lamar Jackson, with Zay Flowers. You look at what the Chiefs do with, like, the crap players they have. They scheme things to get more out of their players than what they have. And the Titans never do that, especially with the receivers. It's been a sticking point for me for years, even back when we still had A.J. Brown. Titans wide receivers are never open, and I think that was more of a schematic issue. It's a little bit personnel, but it was a big schematic issue that we just did not run a scheme that got receivers open. And with, the change of coaches, change of philosophy, change of approach, hopefully that's something we see get adapted going forward. I think but like the point I was kind of trying to start on was, I think a lot of that's going to come down to what we do with the staff around Brian Callahan. He said he's going to be the play caller. I'm fine with that, even though he hasn't called plays before. His experience, working with guys like Zach Taylor, who hadn't called plays till he became the head coach in Cincinnati, all his experience that he's been bouncing around the NFL, like, working with quarterbacks and stuff like that, everything he said about how he wants to work with the players and figure out what's the strength of the players and not necessarily say, like, this is my philosophy, this is the way I do things. Him wanting to work with the players and figure out this is how we're going to best do things. I'm confident in that part of it, but I think there has to be a certain degree to which the strength of the staff around him needs to be good for it to ultimately be successful. So a lot to come there. A lot to see what happens. The one other kind of Titans thing I want to talk about was there was this interview with Wesley Woodyard on local radio here, former starting middle linebacker for the Titans, who he kind of burned Vrabel. Was like, oh, Vrabel, like that 2019 season when we were going to the AFC Championship game, a lot of us in the locker room were like looking around, being like, do we even want to like win this whole thing? Do we want to really boost this guy's ego? And it's like, that's the second he said. Okay, so if you don't follow the interview, he said, essentially, like, him and some of the veteran guys felt like Vrabel wasn't appreciating them enough, that he was kind of like, making it his way or the highway, that his ego was too big. And in the 2019 season, when the Titans made the run to the AFC title game, that Woodyard, and he named names, but he, kind of alluded to some of the other, veteran players were kind of like, do we really even want to win this thing? If we win a Super Bowl, it's just going to make this guy's ego even more out of control. And it's like, I'm so glad that was Wesley Woodyard's last year with the Titans. If that's ever your attitude as a player, like, you don't always have to get along with your coach. You don't always have to agree with his philosophy. You don't always have to, like, get on board with. You probably should get on board with the coach's philosophy, though, because that's the only way a team's going to be successful, is everybody's on the same page. But if you're sitting there thinking, like, actively in the run to a Super Bowl, potentially, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if we want to win this because this guy's, it just make our coach's ego that much bigger. Good riddance. I'm glad that was his last year with the team. I'm glad he was basically out of the NFL after that, and it doesn't surprise me that he was. But I mean, that's what you're going to see. You see it all the time when the players leave teams. Like, it's no secret. Like, anytime like a player who thinks they're so good leaves a team, how many times it's happened where, like, then they trash the coach and like, well, that guy didn't know what we're talking about. And the biggest thing, the stupidest thing Wesley Woodyard said was he was using Adoree Jackson as an example of somebody that left the Titans because of Mike Vrabel and went on Hexx. Like, Adoree Jackson. What has Adoree Jackson done since he left the Titans? Still playing like 10 games a year up in New York, missing like 6, injured every season. Decent corner when he's on the field, but mostly can't stay on the field. Gets burned all the time when he's on the field half the time. If Adoree Jackson is your grand thing you're going to hang your hat on, Wesley Woodyard, and be like, well, look at everything Adoree Jackson did after he left, and Mike Vrabel ran him out of town. It's like, you've already lost your argument, because Adoree Jackson is kind of a piece of crap. He's not like he went up to New York and became an all-pro or something like that. The majority of people that have left the Titans in the last like 4 or 5 years either washed out or out of the league within like a couple seasons. Woodyard himself, Jarrell Casey, great player when he's here, didn't last long when he left. I mean, Tier Tart, the latest, couldn't get along with Mike Vrabel, cut, goes to the Texans. Oh, he's going to prove everybody wrong. He's on the Texans now. He's going to the playoffs. Deactivated, inactive their whole playoff run. Hurt, couldn't play more than like 2 plays at a time when he was down there. So, I mean, what are we doing here? No credence, no credit to Wesley Woodyard. If anything, you lost credit with me by trying to like make yourself sound smarter, like being like, well, we all knew all along this wasn't going to work. He's just a stubborn guy and nobody wanted to listen to him. It's like, yeah, you washed out, lost your spot, and are bitter about it to this day. Shut up, Wesley Woodyard. Transition off the Titans from that to kind of a similar situation, but at the same time not similar, because it's not as bitter. It's not as like there's some bitterness there. Nashville SC, Dax McCarty, first team captain, probably the first like club legend we can really hold up. Knew he was departing the club this offseason, pretty early on in the offseason. That became apparent. Announced a couple weeks back he was going to go to Atlanta United. That was going to be his new club, his new spot. His podcast, he has a podcast called the Journeyman podcast. It's him and 2 other guys who just obviously also never really stuck around anywhere, bounced around MLS, hence the name Journeyman podcast. And Dax kind of gave his side of the story of how he departed Nashville SC. I think, like Ben Wright's a local guy who covers the team, does a really good job of it, but he posted some quotes from the Journeyman podcast from Dax. And if you read them, they sound worse than they actually were. If you actually listen to the podcast, actually hear Dax talk, didn't come off as bad as the way it was written in the tweets. And a lot of Nashville SC fans, like some of the bitter Nashville SC Facebook fans, I think are migrated over to Twitter, and they're like, "Oh, the front office, how dare they treat Dax this way? What a disgrace! Mike Jacobs out." It's like, bro, I think a good chunk of our Nashville SC fans started as FIFA people who just think FIFA, the game FIFA, is how the real world works. Like, you just re-sign all the players that you want, don't sign the ones you don't want, go buy a new player. It's not that simple, especially in MLS where you've got all these stupid, insane GAM, TAM, DPs, U22. It's insane. Like, essentially what Dak said, he said around the time that he was at his peak last season, performing really well in Leagues Cup, there was discussions with Nashville SC about renewing his contract. And they came in with an offer that he said was not disrespectful, but was lower than what he had had previously. And he had already taken pay cuts each of the last like 2 or 3 seasons to stay with Nashville SC. And it's like, well, okay, you're 36 years old. You are slowly being less and less a factor in the team. That's how it works. And he knows that. That's what's so weird to me about him kind of acting like it was such a shock, so taken aback that a 36-year-old center mid whose role in the team honestly needs to be reduced. We were relying on him too much, and we need to reinvest and move off of him. So for him to act like he was shocked and stunned, like, just asked me to take another pay cut. Just can't believe it. Can't believe it. Yeah, here we go. In the comment, R.A. Silva said, MLS salary cap rules are the worst. Yeah, I agree. In a perfect world, like if there was no salary cap, if there was no weird GAM, TAM, DP, all this other crap, would Nashville SC 100% have brought back Dax McCarty? Yeah, if there was just like the budget to do whatever you wanted, to sign whoever you want, to bring him back, no doubt Dax McCarty would have been back. But I don't know enough about the GAM, TAM, salary cap, whatever, to understand how it works. All I know is I could be stupid for this, but I trust our front office that if they decided the financial situation wasn't appropriate, there was no financial way to bring Dax back based on what he probably wanted, it was time to move on because he's 36 years old. He's good when he played, but he had his ups, he had his downs. He wasn't like he was like, I don't know. I don't want to crap on Dax McCarty. I feel like I'm crapping on Dax McCarty a little bit, but I think he was a little bit disingenuous, honestly, in the way he was talking about, like, they'd taken 2 pay cuts and they asked me to take another one. And I thought we could maybe, negotiate from there. And it's like, dude, you, of all people who's bounced around the league, who's been bounced from team to team to team, you of all people should know this is how it works. Do you want to stay here or not? You're not going to get a raise. You're not going to get your same salary. The team cannot keep committing the same level of resources to a 36-year-old center mid. When, especially, if we'd won MLS Cup or if we'd finished top 3 in the league, or if we'd won Leagues Cup and said, yeah, let's run it back. Let's just do it all over again. Let's run it back. Let's see if we can keep the band together. At some point in time, you got to say things aren't working. We've got to try some new things. And would have been great to have Dax. Like, there's no doubt in my mind to have Dax as an option off the bench, to have Dax as an occasional starter would definitely make our squad stronger. But I mean, when he's bumming like, I'd already taken 2 pay cuts. The contract they offered me was kind of like a starting point, but I thought there was maybe some wiggle room we can negotiate. It's like, nah, bro, man, you know this. You have been in this league long enough to know this is how it is. So I think he almost was wanting to get the Nashville SC fans on his side to be like, I wanted to stay, but the team kind of did me dirty or whatever. And it's like, the team didn't do you dirty. Like, they made he kind of indicated that they never really communicated that this is the last best offer. And then suddenly there was just no offer. And it's like, that's on you, dude. To me, that's on you, dude. Like, a veteran guy who's been bounced around the league so many times, and you haven't figured out how the league works yet. Like, that's on Dax. And I do think to a degree, I liked him. Great player, key player, legend in the history of Nashville SC. And I don't completely absolve Nashville SC in this regard. I'm sure there was some degree to which the club maybe could have communicated more clearly with him, maybe could have, laid things out more clearly with him. Like, I mean, you kind of look at what's happening with Derrick Henry on the Titan side of things. He's leaving, pretty graciously. He's, pretty much said, I love my time in Tennessee. I was so happy to be there. But I also understand, the logistics of the way the league works. And I know it's, probably time for me to move on. It's probably a point in time where I can go somewhere and, financially continue to make a good amount of money, contribute, but it doesn't seem like Tennessee's the place where I can do that anymore. And, our new coach, going back to Brian Callahan, he had some really nice comments about Derrick Henry where he said, Derrick Henry, any offense that has Derrick Henry needs to figure out a way to use Derrick Henry because he's still a talented player. He's still a weapon. He's like, I'd be open to Derrick Henry coming back here. But I think, on that regard of things, there's the financial side of it. And I think Derrick Henry understands financially he's going to do better leaving the Titans. I think the Titans understand they're going to do financially better letting him leave. I think Dax was a little bit trying to clean things up on the way out instead of going like, I understand the financial side of things. I understand Nashville SC needs to allocate their resources differently than into me. He tried to like get out cleanly. Like, and as I'm talking through it, I'm getting a little bit bitter at Dax. Like, I didn't want to do this, like, because like I like Dax. I think he was awesome. I think he was a really key player for us. But I like the more I think about it, the more I like talk through it. I'm like, dude, that's been around the league that long. And he's like, oh, I didn't know it was happening. I didn't get a last best offer. And I think the key thing is, there's a lot of people who are like, who've kind of gotten upset with the front office over the last couple of years, acting like the front office doesn't care. They're just happy with mediocrity. We went and signed a 26-year-old British striker as a designated player. Is that something the front office that doesn't care does? Go look at what the freaking Colorado Rapids have done for like the last 5 years, not even having designated players. Some of our fans piss me off with how like bitchy they are about shit. Now I'm getting upset. Bring it down a notch. Settle down. Bring it down a notch. Serenity now. Go listen to Club and Country USA's podcast interview with Mike Jacobs if you want to know the Nashville SC side of things. Because Mike Jacobs is basically, he doesn't say anything, but you can hear in his tone and you can hear in the way he responds. It's like, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, because they ask him, West Bowling, credit to him. He asked Mike Jacobs pointedly, like, Dax McCarty had some, interesting comments, about his departure from the team this, off season, is there anything you'd like to say, from the team side of things? How did you approach it? And Mike Jacobs basically said like, and he said it like, it was like a coach speak kind of answer, but you could hear in his tone, you could tell he was not happy about the way Dax handled things. Because he said like, we wish Dax the best. He's been a key part of our franchise, but we really only want to talk about players that are here right now, that are a part of the team right now. So you could tell there was a little bit of bitterness, a little bit of unhappiness in Mike Jacobs' tone about the way Dax talked. Like Dax tried to go into business for Dax maybe. And, we could have had a mutual parting of the ways and everybody could have been happy, but Dax, podcast host Dax, had to make sure Dax looks good on the way out. I don't know if that's the way. That's the way. Like I'm sort of reading tea leaves, sort of picking things out here, kind of through the things. And I think, like I said, I think more and more about it is, and why I'm starting to be a little bit more, not bitter, but like, what are you doing, Dax? Is like, of all players, this is a dude who he's literally on a podcast called the Journeyman podcast, because him and his co-host all have bounced around the entire MLS. So if there's any dude who should know that the MLS is not like a long-term league for any players, that everybody bounces around, there's always changes, there's always movement in the league, feels like it should be the guy who hosts a podcast called the Journeyman podcast about bouncing around the league, right? But he's just shocked, stunned, like, oh man, I'm 36 years old and the team decided to get younger. I just never saw it coming. A little fishy. I know there's a lot of people that are bitter at our FO, think our FO is not doing anything, even though he signed a 26-year-old designated player striker last summer. Would it be great if everything was just roses and candy and your, club legends could just play out their careers with your team forever? Yeah, Obviously, it would be. Would I just be like a bundle of roses if Dax McCarty and Derrick Henry retired as Titans? Was it a terrible thing that Eddie George had to do one washed out season at the Cowboys? I mean, learn how these sports work. You can't complain about these things. You can't really you can be upset, but it's the way sports works. That's just how it goes. And I think that's why this is just me reading tea leaves. I don't think Mike Jacobs was happy that Dax said what he said because he knows, Dax of all people knows how the business of the side of things work, and Dax was trying to smooth things over and make Dax look like the hero in the situation. So just my take on it, just my situation on it. Let's see here. Got another comment. It's okay to trust front office of salary decisions, but you should also criticize results if they don't deliver. Fair. Completely agree with that. And that's why I would also argue, I think Nashville SC fans expect the team to, hopefully shoot for a higher standard. We finished 7th last year and kind of went out with a whimper. Dax himself in his Journeyman podcast, talking about leaving Nashville SC, said he was the worst player on the field against Orlando in the playoff game where we were eliminated for the season. So to me, cutting ties with an old player that doesn't have as much left in the tank, if you take the emotion out of it, you take that kind of feelings ball out of it, that's a good move by the front office. We signed a 23-year-old British former young designated player from New York Red Bulls to replace Dax. Is that going to work? Is that player Drew Yearwood? Is he going to be a stud who takes us to the next level? We don't know. But in terms of what the team needed to do, getting younger, improving depth, I'd say we did that. Feelings ball side of things, it sucks that Dax is gone. Squad wise, improving the team wise, we'll see. I'll give a more detailed preview of what I think is going to happen this season. Nashville SC a little closer to the season. We had our first preseason game today. I think it was a 3-1 win over St. Louis. Behind closed doors, there's only tweet updates to really read into it. And it's one of those things where half the squad report was trialists that they don't identify that were playing in the game. So who knows what it looked like. Hani, Zimmerman, and Dan Lovitz and a couple others didn't play because they're dealing with fitness issues that Gary said it was too early to push them through some stuff, let them work their fitness up, and we'll get them in later. But yeah, I'll do a full Nashville SC season preview a little closer to the season. So stay tuned for that. But just the Dax thing, just I don't know. It just didn't sit right with me. I wanted to talk about it. So glad I got that off my chest, but it is what it is. Still love Dax. I mean, like I said, I wish he was still on the team. I wish, even if he was on the team, I wish there was a happier separation. I think it's a little selfish and a little unprofessional of him, the way he went about talking about it, because he of all players, like I said, he of all players, it's not it wasn't Steve McNair. Steve McNair, first legend of the Titans era here in Tennessee, they locked him out of the facility because they knew they were going to cut him. And they didn't want him anywhere near the Titans facilities because if he got hurt, they'd be liable for stuff. And they treated him like dog crap on the way out. Dax, what do you want? You want a parade? You want a parade, buddy? I don't know. I don't want to be bitter and stuff. So we're going to move on for that. WWE Royal Rumble is this weekend. Should be a very, very interesting show. Yeah, obviously the two big matches are the Women's Royal Rumble, the Men's Royal Rumble. And there's only I look at this, there's only two other matches announced for the show so far. You got Logan Paul versus Kevin Owens for the United States Championship. That'll be really entertaining. Both, I'm sure they'll put on a good show. I would expect Logan Paul would retain there because he'll probably have something set up to do at WrestleMania. Reigns will be in action. He's defending the Universal Championship in a 4-way against Orton, AJ Styles, and LA Knight. No chance he loses there. It's still going to be Reigns. Sits at the head table until somebody knocks it off him. Women's Rumble, a lot of different ways you can go there. I mean, got Rhea Ripley and Io Sky as the current champions, so you could have Becky Lynch win to set up Becky versus Rhea Ripley, which would be a huge match. You could have Bayley win to further the split and damage control and have her challenge Io Sky. A lot of ways you can go there. Obviously, the men's rumble is like where the most interest is. Potential spoilers here because there's been some reports that have come out this week that I'll talk about. Initially, Justin Barrasso from Sports Illustrated put out an article this week that his sources were telling him, spoilers potentially, that Gunther was going to win the Royal Rumble, challenge Seth Rollins for his World Heavyweight title at WrestleMania, likely dethrone him to continue the build, the push that Gunther's been getting over the last 2 years, basically. That was going to lead to Rock and Roman Reigns, and on the other side of things, Cody Rhodes or CM Punk in another huge match. And I was like, this all makes sense. Like, I know there's been a lot of build, a lot of people pointing to a potential CM Punk Seth Rollins match, but I was kind of like, I don't know if Cody's not getting the shot, if he's not getting to finish the story, not getting his rematch with Roman Reigns, it would kind of make a lot of sense to give him like the next biggest match you could give him would be CM Punk. And CM Punk Cody would be a lot bigger than CM Punk Rollins, in my opinion, because I think Rollins, for all he's done with that World Heavyweight title, that World Heavyweight title is basically like meaningless, unfortunately. But Gunther, who's been unbeatable with his Intercontinental title for, going on 400 days, beating Rollins, kind of combining the two belts, elevates both belts. So that made a lot of sense to me. But then Justin Barrasso came out and contradicted that story and said, well, I was given some bad information. I think the source that I usually have that was reliable turned out to not be so reliable and maybe was even feeding me false information to try to throw me off the scent. And he since said that now he's been told that Cody Rhodes is winning the Royal Rumble, but he does not necessarily know what all the matches that would come out of that would be. Because, obviously, if The Rock's coming back to fight Roman Reigns. That's happening. Tornado in the chat. Hey, what's up, Tornado? The Rock's coming back. He's coming back to fight Roman Reigns. So your options are Cody Rhodes wins the Rumble. He challenges Roman Reigns. You can do Cody versus, because WrestleMania is 2 nights. So one thing you can do is you can do Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns one night, Rock, Roman Reigns the other night. Does that diminish both matches a little bit? Maybe, but I don't know. They're both big matches, and it's got the potential to be the biggest WrestleMania ever. So, throw everything you got at the wall. So we'll see. There are a lot of possibilities. Could be Gunther, could be Cody Rhodes, could be CM Punk, because CM Punk could win, and then he could challenge Rollins, by winning the Royal Rumble. There was reports that Brock Lesnar was supposed to be making his return to the company for the Royal Rumble. But if you're following the news, outside of the ring, there's obviously this horrible, disgusting, terrible story involving Vince McMahon that Brock Lesnar is also looped into. And so you completely understand why WWE would want to wash their hands, keep anybody who's involved in it as far away from the company as possible, especially with the recent merger between WWE and UFC, the whole TKO company now. Vince McMahon officially resigned. All positions he had with both companies today is officially as far out of WWE as he's ever been, except owning stock in the company is all he has left, which had to be the end result. There's no way he could come back from what he was doing already. Like, to my understanding, like his role, he was the chairman still, but he basically had no power left anyway. So it was just getting him having no official ties was the only way you could go. I don't want to get into the details of the story because they're just graphic. They're horrible, but there's no way, especially now with the merger of TKO and WWE and it being such a more public, bigger company than when it was, just Vince's little baby company. There was no way he could survive this. He's out. He's gone. He's still maintaining his innocence and everything, that he's going to fight it. But, you read the details. You know his history. Don't see it end well for him. Don't think he's coming back. Don't think he's going to be back in the limelight anytime soon. And Brock Lesnar is loosely tied into the whole thing, so I can see the company deciding to keep a distance with him as well. So if he was planned to be a part of the Royal Rumble, wouldn't be surprised if he's no longer planned to be a part of the Royal Rumble. But should be an interesting show. Should be good. I depending on when I'm home, I'm going out to dinner. We've got Sissy's birthday tomorrow. We're going out for a big dinner for Sissy's birthday. If I get home in time and the men's Royal Rumble hasn't started yet, I might go live tomorrow night, do like a live watch along of the actual Royal Rumble match itself. So, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell on for notifications. You might get to see that if that happens. I don't know. We'll see what happens tomorrow night with that. But should be a good show. Royal Rumble almost is like a better show than WrestleMania half the time because there's a lot of surprises, a lot of intrigue, a lot of mystery of what could potentially happen. So we'll be watching that. We'll check that out. I'm going to wrap up really quickly. Last couple things I want to chat about really quickly. Got the championship week in the NFL. Got AFC championship, NFC championship, 49ers, Lions, NFC championship for a trip to the Super Bowl, Ravens, Chiefs on the other side of things. I've got 3 future bets locked in on the Ravens winning tomorrow. I've got them to win the AFC, and I bet them twice at different odds to win the Super Bowl. Now, these are like $5 bets. It's not like I've got a whole lot of money tied up in this, so it's not the end of the world if they lose or anything like that. But that is where I have the most financial investment, is I've got like $15 to potentially make like $100+ if the Ravens win the AFC and then go on to win the Super Bowl. So I don't ever want to cheer for the Ravens because I hate the Ravens as a Titans fan. It's just like it's our biggest non-division rival, I think it's fair to say. But I do have money on them. But it's the Chiefs. The Chiefs are getting into that Patriots like level territory where it's like you just, it's hard to bet against the Chiefs until the Chiefs lose. So if I was smarter and I knew how to like hedge, I might hedge my bets and like try to find a way to bet on the Chiefs. But I'm not that smart. So we're just going to ride out the Ravens bets. There's other things. It's hard to see the 49ers lose just because the Lions, great story, really impressive. But it feels like the 49ers have just been like knocking on the door, waiting for their chance, trying to finally get through. And they're healthy. The quarterbacks aren't injured. Everything's going well. It felt like if anybody was going to get them, it was going to be the Packers last week when they struggled early in that game and they got it together and like put it together. And now they're going to be rolling again. So conspiracy theory for the logo, conspiracy theory for like some of the Canadian news stations that were preeminently reporting it. I think we're destined for a Ravens 49ers Super Bowl. So place your bets accordingly. Anything else? I think that's enough for tonight. We're going to wrap it up. Like I said, these, throughout the year going forward, and we're not going to necessarily go live every Friday. Just when we have stuff to chat about, when we have stuff to talk about, we'll jump on, chat about it. Appreciate those who jumped in while we were here. If you're watching this on a replay, obviously appreciate you watching as well. We got a lot going on. Nashville Hot Chicken Week coming up next week. So we'll actually have some new stuff coming to the channel there after having kind of a little dormant month of January. But, after that, Nashville SC games will be coming fast and furious. We've got a preseason game that we're actually going to get to go to on February 7th. And then we've got back-to-back home games, I think the 25th and 28th, something like that. So lots of stuff coming up on the channel after kind of a dormant, early start to the year. So stay tuned, subscribe, turn the bell on for notifications. And until the next time, enjoy your life.